Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Yankees avoid the sweep. They lose 2 of 3 to the Detroit Tigers, and the Yankee offense was really held down basically the entire series. And I had a feeling, I mean, you looked at the pitching matchups, they weren't great. I mean, Casey Mize, Tarik Skubal, and Jack Flaherty. I mean, those are the 3 starters for Detroit, who's a good, solid team. Again, the lineup isn't really going to jump out at you, and that's not really their calling card. It is pitching, and starting pitching specifically. But Comerica Park's a tough place to hit anyway, and then you add these, weather elements as well. Cold, windy. They had to move all 3 games, as discussed at the end of the last episode, the Pittsburgh Pirates episode. The fact that you don't see that often. I think that MLB might start implementing this more, which is smart, honestly, right? In order to get to have a better chance of getting games in, um, and avoiding just rigid and bad, uncomfortable uh, environment. And so, you know, 3 afternoon games, and Max Fried really kind of saves the day, saves the series in a way, salvages it with just an amazing gem-like performance, an ace-like performance. It's funny, I brought it up a few episodes ago about, like, it's somewhat semantics as far as, like, who's the ace, with Garrett Cole out, like, between Fried and Rodon, but it is Fried, and I know that, like, things can change from start to start, but Fried, like, with him, you just feel like he's in control out there. There's a mental makeup and mindset with him. It feels like something you can trust. Where with Rodon, even in a best case scenario, you just don't know. He's very capable of making that mistake. And with Free, like, just the fact that he was able to get 11 strikeouts to me was highly impressive, in 7 shutout innings. In a game the Yankees really, for this early in the season, it was a big game. They were trying to avoid the sweep. They were on a 3-game losing streak. The bats were very, very quiet, and they needed that from him just to take the ball and say, "Hey, like, I got this," against Jack Flaherty, who was his high school teammate. So the stakes were fairly high given how early the season this is. And it's nice that the Yankees, at least, 2 situations against Arizona and against Detroit where they could have been swept, but were, able to stave that off. And it's interesting how the first 4 series of the year, the team that won game 1, won game 2. So in other words, it's played out. The only difference was that you had the Yankees sweep against the Brewers, but the other 3 series, Yankees winning the Pittsburgh one, were situations like I said, all 4 series, the team that won game 1 won game 2. Very odd, that there has been no rubber games to this point, because I remember previous seasons where it almost felt like every series featured a rubber game. So ultimately, it lands the Yankees at 7-5, which, again, results wise, coming out of the series, not bad. But I think, you know, like I've talked about, the Yankee offense, while it is dangerous, and while I do think the lineup is deep, they do struggle against top tier pitching. Now that's like obvious. That's an obvious statement on the one hand, but I think you have to have the ability to find a way to scratch runs out. And the Yankees have not really done that again. And it's not like it's, like against Corbin Burns, they did a nice job against him. It's not like it's all the time. And it's not like it's always only going to be against a stud. Look at Andrew Heaney. Andrew Heaney, Yankees, Yankee fans know him. He is not one of the top pitchers of the league, and yet he shut them down. Again, I still have concerns about the Yankees versus left-handed pitching, specifically starting pitching. But um, and maybe we can chalk this up again. Like, I think the elements of the weather in Detroit, you can't ignore that, but I also don't think that's an excuse. So just kind of thinking about some of the lineup and who's kind of struggling right now, and I'll tell you players that I'm more concerned about than others. But real quick too, I hadn't been aware just as far as the transactions are concerned. Kind of changing subjects, and we'll go right back to the lineup. Um, Brent Hedrick, I did not know that he had options. I did not know that he had minor league options. So he was actually sent down, which makes sense. And I think we'll see him again. He looked really good. Left-handed pitcher, seems like he can be flexible as far as, giving him a little bit of length as well. I think that we'll see him a lot over the course of the season, given, how he performed early at least. And so Adam Ottavino was brought back on the roster. They basically re-signed him, only for him to then get designated for assignment after he faced 3 batters in game 1, walked 2 of them. It was kind of a typical Ottavino outing where, a couple walks, there was a strikeout as well, but for Ian Hamilton to be back on the roster. So in essence, it was basically Hedrick down, Hamilton up, if you will. But I think that what it told me with Ottavino is I think that they might go a little bit of roster manipulation. He'll be kind of like in and out. But a lot of that does depend on a few things and him being effective. Whereas I feel like in his first 2 outings in the Arizona series, he was okay. This one, it's like, not great, but probably not terrible enough for them to change their opinion on him. So that's the situation there. Going back to the lineup, um, I think it's very important for Ben Rice to be at the top of this lineup, honestly, against righties or lefties, definitely against righties, but he's been very comfortable against lefties as well. The big home run of this series was against Tyler Holcomb in the 7th inning, a lefty. And it's twofold. It's not only because I think Rice is doing well, but you look at the other lefties in the lineup, and I'll go in order, I guess, of where they typically are in the lineup from top to bottom, kind of. And it's the lefties specifically. Well, I think Rice is important to have in there. Even when Stanton comes back, I think a lot can change by then. But Cody Bellinger, it's been a struggle so far, and a lot of it's been a little bit weird. I'll grant him that, and I'm a fan of Cody Bellinger. Like I've made that clear, but you have to call it how you see it. And Bellinger, unfortunately for him, had a bout of food poisoning, which caused him to miss game 2. Ate bad chicken wings and was up all night. I guess Monday night going into Tuesday. So, and we know he had the stiff back. So, like, look, like there are some factors here, but the fact is he hasn't been very good. But with him, though, I'm not really that concerned. Someone who I'm a little bit more critical of, Jazz Chisholm Jr. Um, striking out at a crazy, crazy clip. 180 batting average, OPS down to 715. He seems very all or nothing, where it's like the swings are very like, all right, I'm going for broke. I'm going for home runs. Like that's it. And it's a bit of a concern for me. And he has a nice cushy spot in that lineup. You're not going to see him bat really lower than 5th on most occasions. Now, the problem is the alternatives aren't really great, so I kind of see him staying there for a while, and he does have a solid track record. But I don't know, with Jazz, we're not too far away, I think, from other fans maybe, and look, I may not be alone here, but kind of recognizing that, hey, like he's not doing all that well. Um, and I'm not feeling comfortable with him in big situations, him against lefty, like just all the way across the board, not really thrilled with Jazz. And again, so it's kind of the lefties that are the biggest issue here. Trent Grisham started the first 2 games, cooled off slightly. I still think Trent is someone that should get some fairly regular run. Honestly, like between him and Dominguez, sure, let it be a 50-50 type split, but I'd almost prefer Grisham over Dominguez because Dominguez has had his struggles as well. I feel like by and large, there's been some decent moments, but he has not been great at the plate. I feel like he's been striking out a bit lately. His batting average is down to 205 with a 654 OPS. Austin Wells as well from the left side, batting 189 with a 711 OPS. So with Wells, it kind of is what it is. It's not that I'm not really concerned about him, but he's not at the level of like what Cody Bellinger is, right? So with Wells, you have to keep expectations a little more in check. On the flip side, as far as the good stuff, Paul Goldschmidt has really done a very, very nice job being very consistent, batting 380 through the 942 OPS. It's funny, like he's not hitting for much power, but a lot of hits along the way, and just good quality at bat. So Goldschmidt, someone that I was a little bit unsure on, and he's just a lefty killer as well, which this lineup desperately needs. So that's been good. Aaron Judge does what Aaron Judge does, right? Like he leaves this series with a 354 batting average and a 1.238 OPS overall. So like he's going to be like the leader of the pack, of course. Anthony Volpe, didn't have a great series, and that's something to monitor. Like you need that first week and a half or so to not just be a mirage. You need some of that to stay moving forward. But let's discuss this series kind of game by game. And look, Detroit is a very, to me, they're a solid team. They are one I think that could come out of the AL Central when push comes to shove and it's playoff time. If that rotation stays healthy, I think the Tigers they're decent. Again, that lineup is not great, but I think that they have a formula that works. And so game one was Carlos Rodon against Casey Mize. And it was unfortunate because to me, once you lost this game, like you weren't going to win the series because to me, and it was proven true, you were not going to win the Carrasco Skubal matchup. That just wasn't going to happen. And it didn't happen. Um, and so Rodon loses, drops to 1-2, 6 innings, 4 hits, 6 runs, 5 of them are in 3 walks and 8 strikeouts. So he had strikeout stuff. And what I've seen with a lot of these Yankees pitchers is the first time through, it goes pretty well. Then the second time through, it doesn't. And I'm not saying that was necessarily what happened here so much with Rodon. It was a couple of mistakes, one big one to Andy Ibanez, and also a poor call by the home plate on what should have been strike three, which could have changed the feel and the result of that third inning. But if you're Rodon, you still have to be able to get by that, and he didn't. And so that's the thing with Rodon is that even in a best case scenario with him, he is prone to the home run ball. He just is. When all is said and done, he's probably going to be up there as far as leaders in, as far as home runs allowed. Um, and again, it's not as if the problem is that there's also walks, 3 walks for Rodon. I know one of them wasn't really his fault, but he needs to cut down on that too. They've really come back to bite him after what was a really good, that home opener, that first game of the season against Milwaukee. I thought he was excellent. And then it's kind of been a little bit of a mixed bag where, to his credit, he's always kind of gotten Yankees deep into games this year because deep into games, like by new MLB standards, 6 innings really at this point, that is kind of going deep into a baseball game, where it wasn't years ago. But um, this lineup features no Jason Dominguez. You kind of had to stick with Trent Grisham given how hot he was going into the series. Ben Rice leads off, and I think that'll continue against right-handed starters, certainly. And then pretty much everything else was standard. But Casey Mize really did shut the Yankees down. And, you have an RBI, you have a situation because there weren't that many opportunities throughout the series to get stuff done in the first inning. And we'll talk about really where there was a major fuck up. In the first inning, you did have a Jazz Chisholm Jr. runners in scoring position spot with 2 out, and he flies out. But it was the third inning where Ben Rice makes a very, very bad mistake. He gets a 1-out triple, right? And Ben Rice really, in terms of true threats, Ben Rice was the biggest Yankee. I mean, Judge is in that category as well. Don't get me wrong, but Ben Rice was someone that put up pretty good at bats, and Ben Rice triples off of Mize. However, during this at bat with Aaron Judge up, he gets picked off third. Jake Rogers throws him out. Andy Ibanez gets the tag now. Rice was out. That is inexcusable. That is the stuff the Yankees need to clean up. You cannot have shit like that this season. That just cannot happen. They need, Yankees need to be sound defensively and base running because that has been a problem in previous years. So that kind of kills that inning completely. And then the next inning is where you have Rodon getting into walks problems. Jake Rogers, who ends up actually going on the IL after game one, he ended up walking, I think, 3 times in this game, and you just can't have that happen. Jake Rogers is a bottom of the order guy, and he walks with 1 out, and then Ryan Kreidler walks as well. And that was the one where Rodon kind of got screwed, where it should have been strike three. But Rodon did strike out the next batter, only for it to be a 2-out 3-run shot for Andy Ibanez, first homer of the year. That, in the moment, you knew 3-run homers are massive. Those are big ones. And for that to make it 3-0 right there was tough. And the Yankees offense really didn't do much. They did score a run in the fifth, and Trent Grisham was involved again. He does get a 1-out single. Ben Rice gets a 2-out walk, and then Aaron Judge in the RBI single. So Judge, the Yankees only had, how many runs did they have in this series? 6. And Aaron Judge had an RBI on 3 of those 6. So that makes it 3-1, but then Cody Bellinger strikes out. Again, Cody Bellinger, it's been a disappointment to this point of the season. Would expect things to get better, but it has been a little bit frustrating. Then at the bottom of the fifth, Oswaldo Cabrera. And I'm going to give him some praise offensively as we get to game three. But defensively, it was a trying series for him at third. Not to the point of making me think anything differently of Oswaldo, because he really is a very sound defensive player, especially for his versatility. But he does make an error on a Colt Keith ground ball. And so that kind of opens up some floodgates in the fifth, because then Drake Rogers walks, Ryan Kreidler gets a sac bunt, and then Justin Henry Malloy gets a 2-run single. So the two mistakes were the Ibanez turn homer and the Malloy 2-run single to make it 5-1. Rodon pitches into the seventh inning, where he gives up a single to Colt Keith, and then Adam Ottavino comes on, and there's a couple of walks in the mix, a strikeout in between, and then Tim Hill relieves Ottavino. They do get it, and that is where Trey Sweeney gets an RBI ground out to make it 6-1. Then the top of the eighth, the Yankees off of Bo Brisky are able to get a run, but it's based around an error. It's based around Jazz Chisholm Jr. Um, reaching on an error by Colt Keith to make it 6-2. So, it made things, I guess, slightly interesting in the moment. For Anthony Volpe was up in a situation where maybe if he did something, Yankees could have made this a thing, but he flies out. And ultimately, the Yankees lose. Tommy Kahnle, former Yankee Tommy Kahnle, is able to pitch a 1-2-3 inning with a couple of strikeouts as well. So pretty impressive outing for him. And so the Tigers win game one by a score of 6-2. Game two, not going to be a whole lot to discuss. Really, Tarik Skubal, who was due because he hadn't, he had a couple of rough outings, believe it or not. And so that's not a good recipe for the Yankees. As Skubal picks up his first win of the year, he goes 6 innings, 4 hits, no on runs, no walks, 6 strikeouts. So it wasn't a crazy amount of strikeouts, but he was just in command basically all day long. And what didn't help is he had a lead. And Carlos Carrasco, first time through, was fine, but then the home run barrage was on, as he is of 3 solo homers in the fourth inning. Carrasco's final line: 4 1/3 innings, 6 hits, 4 runs, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. Carrasco, for me, like, when Schmidt comes back, I think Carrasco's the move. I wasn't sure. The thing is, Stroman's kind of off the table because of the financial commitment, because the fact of the matter is Stroman is not good, but he's not going anywhere for now. So it kind of comes down to Warren or Carrasco. And I know that Warren has the options, and I know that Warren hasn't exactly proven himself, but for me, if you had to make the Schmidt decision right now, and look, there's still a couple of more starts, one each for them until you have to kind of make that call. Um, I would just, get rid of Carrasco. I just think at this point in his career, he doesn't have any type of stuff that makes you feel confident. Whereas Warren, at least he's a young arm that, if he can kind of harness it, there is true ability there, untapped, I guess. So I think Carrasco's days are somewhat close to numbered, but maybe he'll get at least one more start. Probably will. And maybe that can change hearts and minds, but he's it's been tough. Game two, going up against the lefty, it means that Paul Goldschmidt moves to the leadoff spot, and that's really suited him very well. And obviously, he's good against lefties, so that's kind of twofold. But he has a 3-hit game on this day. Really, it was just Goldschmidt and Judge were the only ones. So Aaron Judge was, as I said, Ben Rice before, it was 3 players, really. It was Goldschmidt, Rice, and Judge that were by far the 3 best offensive players for the Yankees in this series. But this would be a game where Cody Bellinger was out due to food poisoning, so they didn't really have to make a tough decision. Figure it would have been Ben Rice or Trent Grisham that would have sat this game. Oswald Peraza started at third. So Pablo Reyes has been really demoted to just kind of like in a pinch running total bench role. And it's a platoon between Oswaldo Cabrera and Oswald Peraza. Again, the best chance the Yankees had was the first inning. Single for Goldschmidt, single for Rice, but then Judge strikes out, Chisholm grounds out, and then Volpe strikes out. And then from there, Skubal just really shut him down. Second inning is where Detroit gets the lead. Torkelson ground rule double, Colt Keith single, and then a sac fly for Zach McKinstry. And then in the fourth inning is where things just blow up on Carrasco. Torkelson homer, his third of the year. And then with one out, you get back-to-back homers for Zach McKinstry, his first homer of the year, and then Dylan Dingler, the catcher, who replaced the spot of Jake. Well, not the spot, but he is now starting in place of Jake Rogers. Makes it 4-0 Detroit. Bottom of the fifth, Ryan Yarbrough comes in, the lefty, and the first batter he faces is Kerry Carpenter, who homers. So Kerry Carpenter's fourth homer of the season. Yarbrough, besides that was fine, but he does allow that homer. Ian Hamilton makes his season debut and looked pretty good doing so, picking up a couple of strikeouts in the seventh inning. And then Fernando Cruz, he pitches the eighth, 1, 2, 3 inning, gets a strikeout as well, but nothing to speak of. Skubal goes those six, and the final three innings go to the lefty for Detroit, Brant Herter. And so the final score is 5-0 Tigers in game two. They win the series at that point. So we go to game three, and that is where Max Fried is able to, help the Yankees avoid the sweep. And it was a really, really big outing. Fried goes 7 innings, 5 hits, no runs, no walks, and 11 strikeouts. That's the thing. No walks, 11 strikeouts. Highly impressive. His ERA drops to 1.56 on the season, and he's 2-0 so far in three starts, and was one out away from being 3-0 in that first start against the Brewers. In this one, it makes sense that Trent Grisham was on the bench, considering the fact that he started the first two games and Dominguez sat the first one. It was kind of Grisham's turn to sit, and he did. JC Escarra was also catching in place of Austin Wells. And so gives Escarra a little bit of credit, too, for him to be behind the plate for this Fried start. It's Fried doing most of the work, but hey, Escarra was his battery mate. And so, that was an effective one at bat. So Jack Flaherty, his line, the one good thing the Yankees did was they did work the Flaherty pitch count, but Flaherty was really good. 5 1/3 innings, 3 hits, no runs, 3 walks, 9 strikeouts. So again, sometimes those strikeout numbers are a bit of on the concerning side for the Yankees, but you kind of have to live with that. They're just matching zeros for a while. Um, and then they get him out of the game in the sixth. And the Yankees don't score on a second and third one-out spot. Tyler Holton comes in. This is after you get a Judge walk and a Goldschmidt double with a Bellinger strikeout sandwiched in between. And Jazz Chisholm Jr. brands that to the pitcher, lefty. And for me, there was no real faith that he would come through there. And they get Judge out in a rundown. And then Volpe strikes out. And again, Volpe had a bit of a rough series. So now we go to the seventh inning, and with 2 outs, it's Oswaldo Cabrera singling off the lefty. And I bring that up because Oswaldo, I believe, in a very, very short sample size, I think he's somewhere around 4 for 6. Now, look, he has no pop whatsoever as a righty. He doesn't. Like, it's really kind of a straight single situation. But hey, he's looking somewhat comfortable up there, and good for him to be able to do that, and to get that single with 2 outs to keep the line moving for Ben Rice to smash a 2-run homer again off of the lefty Holton. That was huge. The Yankees needed that badly. That was the hit of the series for the Yanks, and it gives them a 2-0 lead. And then in the seventh inning, and they did make a defensive switch, of course, getting Dominguez out, Grisham in. There was a play earlier where Dominguez, I think maybe in was it the sixth or the fifth? I think it might have been the fifth, where it's a Zach McKinstry triple that really should have been a double, but Dominguez was kind of fucking around in the corner there. Um, Dylan Dingler gets a leadoff double, but Fried really bears down, and he gets the next 3 outs, and the final one was a strikeout to Ryan Kreidler, where Fried was pretty pumped up, and deservedly so. So just yeoman's work by Max Fried. Luke Weaver pitches the bottom of the eighth and does a nice job. There was a single in there, and it wasn't perfect, but he gets a strikeout to finish off Riley Green. Again, there's a clutchness factor to Luke Weaver that you can't, it needs to be something that is acknowledged. We go to the top of the ninth, and this is where Detroit's defense gets the best of them, and it was actually really important. So John Brebbia comes in, and JC Escarra is hit by a pitch, but before that, Dylan Dingler was unable to catch 2 foul pop-ups near the screen. He should have gotten both of them. He hits neither. Escarra hit by a pitch, Oswaldo Cabrera hit by a pitch, and then and actually Pablo Reyes replaces Escarra as a pinch runner. And then Ben Rice, what probably would have been a 4-6-3 double play, Colt Keith Boots. Everyone's safe. This was huge. Bases on a no out, and Aaron Judge with a 2-run single to make it 4-0. Those were very big insurance runs. And then Cody Bellinger walks, but unfortunately, and Paul Goldschmidt's been really good, he hits a double play to the pitcher. 1-2-3 double play, and then Jazz Chisholm Jr. strikes out because that's kind of what he's been doing. And so what could have been a total blowout situation becomes 4-0, and Devin Williams comes on, and Devin Williams, man, I do not feel great about him. I know it's early. Chances are he'll turn it around and be great, but I am just not like his demeanor, the pitch ability, not putting guys away, even though I know he got a couple of strikeouts here. Really disappointing and something that we need to monitor because look, like Devin Williams is going to be a key part of this equation for this Yankee team and bullpen. And it's been bad. Leadoff walk to Spencer Torkelson. You can't do that. But then he strikes out Zingler and Keith. But then he gives up a single to Javier Baez. Trey Sweeney as a pinch hitter walks. Like you can't do that. And so it leads to a situation where it's bases loaded for Zach McKinstry. So he's the tying run on a 4-0 game. Williams' pitch count is up there at this point because he's struggling with walks and things like that. And there was a wild pitch as well where Austin Wells was unable to corral it, makes it 4-1, second and third, 2 out. And then McKinstry gets a 2-run single, which wasn't good. But what made things worse, Aaron Judge tries to throw the runner out at home, which was ill-advised. I know he felt like he had a chance, and if he got it, great. But that runner wasn't important. McKinstry was important. And so by him throwing past the cutoff man, McKinstry goes to second. That could have been very problematic. Boone gets Devin Williams out of there, which was the right thing to do. And his pitch count was way too high anyway. He was at 33 pitches. So Mark Leiter Jr. comes on. And so it has to have you a little bit nervous. We know that Leiter Jr. at times has come through in these sort of fireman situations to kind of just extinguish, the inning. But he also fucked up against Eugenio Suarez in that Arizona game. But he is able to get Justin Henry Malloy to fly out to Chisholm, and the Yankees hold on to win 4-3. So it got a little bit dicey at the end there, but they are able to pull off the win. And so now they will head home to take on the San Francisco Giants, who, as I'm recording this, they're trying to avoid a sweep of getting swept themselves. They started 8-1. But then they lost the first 2 games to Cincinnati, and now they're trying to mount a comeback. They were losing 6-1. Now it's 6-5 in the 7th, and they have a chance to maybe tie the game. All that to say, San Francisco's a pretty good team, a team that certainly will be in the running to make the playoffs in a strong NL West. And let's discuss the pitching matchups. It'll be lefty Robbie Ray versus Marcus Stroman, and the Yankees saw Ray a lot in the past with Toronto. This Yankee roster is obviously different than what it had been then, but there is that familiar sense with him. So we'll see what happens between Ray and Stroman. Again, when Fried and Rodon are on pitching, those are going to be tough ones to win. Game 2 will be Jordan Hicks, who used to be a closer with the Cardinals, has been turned a starter against Will Warren. And then game 3, probably the most interesting one on paper for many reasons. Logan Webb, who's off to a good start, really the ace of the San Francisco staff against Carlos Rodon, the former San Francisco Giant. So former teammates right there. That's a good one and an interesting one. I wish the Yankees were facing Justin Verlander. And that's not something I would have said years ago, but he's been really poor and he's still trying to keep it going, but the stuff just isn't there. But he pitched the last game of the Cincinnati series. So the Yankees will not face Justin Verlander. So it starts at a 6-game homestand where the next 3 games will be against Kansas City. So the Yankees schedule to this point, it hasn't been overly difficult, but they've been playing some pretty quality teams as well. And San Francisco and Kansas City is kind of, in that similar vein. So we'll see what happens. The Yankees will hope to kind of find that home run ball again, which kind of eluded them. They hadn't homered in, 3+ games. And then Ben Rice kind of broke that streak with his big homer in the 7th. But Yankees lose the series to Detroit, but it could have been worse. They do avoid the sweep, really thanks to Max Fried delivering. And now they will head home and they will start a 6-game homestand, which begins with the San Francisco Giants.